Welcome back, guys. So in this video, we're going to be discussing three core crucial lessons that psychedelics have to teach us that are fairly common, fairly universal. So if you're kind of new to psychedelics, you're kind of exploring them or wanting to explore them, you're kind of looking into whether or not it might be right for you, this might be a useful video for you. But also, if you are a seasoned psychonaut, as they would say, or someone who's, certainly been down the rabbit hole, this might offer you a bit of a twist, a new insight into a familiar experience for you, and help you kind of pull apart some of the insights that psychedelics have to offer. So I hope you enjoy this. So quick note here, I am trying to do this. There's just a really nice consistent breeze blowing on me, so that probably means some rumble for the audio here. I'm going to see if I can clean it up after the fact. But if this is unwatchable, then my apologies. I will probably re-record this content if I need to. Okay, so let's just crack into it here because there's quite a bit to say. I'm trying to be concise here for you guys because I do tend to ramble quite a bit. So one of the major kind of things we've discovered through psychedelic science and brain imaging with psychedelics is that one of the things that happens when you take a psychedelic is the switching off of what's called the default mode network of the brain. Now, the default mode network, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, is housed in the dominant hemisphere of the brain. So for most people, that's going to be the left brain. For some people, if you're left-handed, it could potentially be the right side of your brain. But the dominant hemisphere of the brain is always the part that we use to kind of operate in our day-to-day rational, logical, problem-solving kind of mode. And one of the things that psychedelics does is switch this off, or at least turn the volume of that part of the brain way down and allow the subdominant, the non-dominant hemisphere of the brain, which has more to do with parallel processing rather than linear processing, and kind of emotional, intuitive, creative, you could say, processing of information kind of take over. So basically what happens is we step outside of our normal mode of processing reality, and we process reality in a different way. So lesson number one about psychology, about your brain, about mental healing, about personal transformation, one of the first things that psychedelics can teach you is that when you are able to step outside of your default mode, all of a sudden solutions become visible, become apparent, become possible for you that weren't possible for you before. So this is also true with other modalities. There are other ways to get outside the default mode besides taking psychedelics. So let's be clear, I'm not necessarily advocating that you take psychedelics. I'm just saying this is what happens when you take them. One of the reasons that I love hypnosis, one of the reasons I love hypnotherapy is that it also takes you outside of the default mode network for the time period that you are kind of in trance. So this becomes a profound lesson when you start to have these experiences of going outside of your traditional, rational, linear processing for problem solving, and you just get out into this deeper space, and all of a sudden the solutions appear. All of a sudden the solutions arise in you, and you realize that all you had to do was kind of get outside of the box or the paradigm of thought that you're normally stuck inside of. So that's lesson one. No matter how you do it, one of the things that psychedelics will show you is that when you get outside the paradigm of your own thinking, your own standard mode of behavior, and you operate in a different way, suddenly solutions arise in you. So that's lesson number one. And it should be said that, some therapists don't like that message or won't like that message because, in effect, it can sound escapist. It can sound like I'm saying, run away from your problems, avoid your problems, just stay inside the box of grappling with your problems, and suddenly, eventually, you'll find the answer through struggle and pain and toil. I've tried that path. I've chewed, I've journaled, I've dug, I've done everything I can to really go deep on getting at the content and getting at the emotions and going through the therapeutic process. And what I found is that for me, being inside the box of problem and grappling with a problem, right? So there's problem, and then there's trying to find the solution inside the same box as the problem, inside the same paradigm. I've found for me is a very slow, unpredictable way of getting results. Sometimes it works, but a lot of times it doesn't, or a lot of times it's just very, very slow, and it can be a very painful, confusing way of approaching changing and healing. So when you get outside the paradigm that you're stuck in, all of a sudden the solutions become much more obvious. So just want to say that really quick. So lesson number 2 is a really interesting one because it's both metaphoric and literal here. So lesson number 2 is that when you think dimensionally, when you think in a 3D manner about your problems, suddenly you're able to find solutions to them that never occurred to you before. So one of the interesting phenomena that seems to happen when people are in trauma, are in low vibration, are in fear, are in anxiety, depression, or in any sort of kind of heavy-duty negative state, especially if it's habituated, what you'll find a lot of is that when people are in these states, they experience the problem in a very two-dimensional, kind of up in your face, very flat kind of way. So I mean that both when I say that language, when I use that kind of language, I mean that both metaphorically and literally. When I work with people and when I work with myself and working on a problem and I'm working on how they represent that inside their mind, and I have them close their eyes and go inward and tell me about the problem, it literally occurs to them as something that's flat, as something that's kind of one, well, not one-dimensional because it'd be a point in space, but two-dimensional, and very kind of singular in how it's represented. So there's not a lot of nuance or detail. It's just, this is the problem, this is the thing, this is how it is, kind of an experience, right? Now, what's interesting about that is when you take a psychedelic, because your brain starts to have a lot of cross-talk, a lot of cross neural circuitry talk. So different parts of your brain that normally wouldn't communicate as much together start to communicate a lot more. And what happens is, because they're communicating, you're getting the ability to roll around anything you want to think about, right? It doesn't have to be a problem. It could be an idea, it could be a creative idea or an inspiration or an insight or a piece of wisdom. But this is especially useful in a therapeutic sense for problem solving. You start to be able to roll it around in a 3D way. And so not only are you able to think about your problem from your own point of view, from that one vantage point, you're able to think about it from other vantage points as well, outside of yourself. You're able to think about it from other people's points of view, or from a third person, like a fly on the wall point of view, like literally dimensionally. You're able to kind of turn your problem around from different angles. Look at what are the hidden benefits in your problem. Look at what are the other ways of interpreting your problem. Look at what are the good aspects of having the problem that you have? What are the bad aspects of having the problem that you have? How could your problem be worse than it is? You start to think more dimensionally. You start to really roll it around. What is the 3D experience of this problem, rather than just this monochromatic, flat, singular? And while I'm saying that, and I kind of mean that metaphorically, that's also true literally when you close your eyes and you think about how you make a picture or you make a representation of your problem inside your head. You're able to see and experience that problem much more 3D. And because of that, you're able to understand it with greater insight and either reframe it, either understand it from a different point of view that makes it not a problem, or you're able to change it. You're able to understand the mechanisms of change that'll really get at shifting the problem, especially, if I do say so myself, if you start engaging the work that I'm doing and you start learning how to do some of this change work. Once you start to learn how to do self-change work and you start to apply it to whatever problem you have in a psychedelic space, it becomes very, very easy to change things very quickly. So that's really interesting. But the bigger, broader message here is that psychedelics really teach you to think dimensionally, to think in terms of the 3D-ness of an experience and not just the monochromaticness or the one flat dimensional experience of it. And when you start to think of anything in life, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a problem. It could be a person, it could be a relationship, it could be an experience you want to have, it could be something you want to create, it could be anything. You start to think about it from various angles and different kind of perspectives. You become much more creative you become much more insightful, and you find the ability to achieve what you want to achieve much more easily because you literally have more information. So that's something that's really cool about psychedelics, is they train your brain to think in that way, to think like multifaceted, right? Very cool. So lesson number 3 that you get from psychedelics, and I think this is a deep one. This is one that I like to harp on. I think it's actually very, very important, is that you learn how quickly you can shift states. And you learn this because you will go through a rainbow of different emotions and thoughts and experiences and perceptual vantage points and sets of meanings and desires, and you'll ruminate on the past, you'll ruminate on the present, you'll think about things you want to do in the future, you'll think about people, you'll think about cosmic abstract concepts, you'll go from joy to fear to confusion to pleasure to bliss to laughter to just kind of wonder and like awe. You shift through all these different states. There's not a singular feeling that you feel usually for a psychedelic experience, which is true to life. I mean, that's true day to day, that's true hour to hour, but that's especially true if you take a psychedelic. It really loosens up all the different states, and it proves to you a couple things. It proves to you, one, that you are capable of shifting states really quickly. You may not know how, you may not know why, you may not know what the mechanisms are to really get at those shifts, but the proof becomes kind of pretty irrefutable that you are capable of a lot of shift very quickly. The other cool thing about it is it gives you a whole spectrum, a whole rainbow of states, mind states, perspectives, emotions that you may not even have words for, or that might be familiar to you from moments in your past, but you haven't touched upon in years, that all of a sudden become very available to you. And when they are, all of a sudden you realize that you have a whole library of different mind states available to you and inside of you in a given moment. And if you learn how to tap into all those different mind states and all those different perspectives and ways of being and really use them for whatever, for creativity, for generating new ideas, for redefining your understanding of your relationship to life, that's a big one, or for transforming some problem that you're chewing on, something you're trying to figure out. For any of that, it becomes super useful. One of the things that we do in the work that I do is that we connect some of these states that might be resources for you to where the problems are, to where the struggles or the challenges are, so that you have so much more to draw on. And that's one of the cool things about psychedelics. They really give you this amazing, amazing ability to have a full, deep reservoir of different states and emotions and meanings that you can draw from. And that becomes so much more useful because when you're talking about personal growth, you're talking about personal transformation or personal healing, one of the biggest problems isn't actually stopping or fixing the problem. One of the biggest problems, one of the biggest things people struggle with is coming up with better states, better emotions, having deeper, more rich resolution of different ways they want to feel instead. People so often in a session with me will get stuck on when I ask them the question, well, how would you rather feel instead? Or what would you like to feel that would be a better? Or what would be a resource state, some way that you felt before that would really kind of counterbalance this and be the right thing to help you transform and change this problem? So it's a very common question I'll ask in one of my sessions. And it's so interesting how often people get stumped there. It's like people's brains are so not used to thinking in terms of positive emotion, good feelings, or even just maybe not good feelings, but feelings that serve you and are empowering or nourishing for you. And yet, when we're able to access them, when we're aware of them, when we know they exist, suddenly we put them with the problem in the right way. There's a certain way to go about it, but when you put them with a problem, suddenly you're able to really transform stuff pretty profoundly. So psychedelics become this amazing library, this amazing resource, this amazing pool of different states that all of a sudden you discover about yourself that you didn't even know you're capable of feeling, that then becomes super useful when it comes time to transform or change or heal or something. So those are 3 huge lessons that psychedelics teach you about yourself, about the nature of your mind, the nature of your brain, and the nature of change, the nature of personal growth and personal transformation. There are a lot of other lessons. There are a lot of more specific things that we could go into and say, but I think for now I want to leave it at that. I just want to give you the three kind of major things that they can teach you and show you about your own mind and how these can apply to personal development. So if you're someone who, is, again, either interested for the first time, interested as a newbie, or someone who is just kind of, becoming more interested in psychedelics, but maybe you're very familiar in terms of personal growth, personal transformation, that kind of a thing. These are just kind of my thoughts off the top of my head here in terms of ways that they become very useful for you on your personal growth path. So I hope that's useful. I hope that's inspiring. I'll see you guys in the future.